please join presenting sponsor Midway Companies as we welcome Mr. Tom D'Alessandro. Tom D'Alessandro brings more than 20 years of experience leading real estate development and management organizations. He most recently served as president of privately held McShane Development Company, and he's the founder of Albemarle Street. His career spans Reston, Virginia, the Woodlands, and over a dozen other large-scale master plan communities, including Summerlin, Nevada, and Columbia, Maryland. He's responsible for over 60 commercial, office, industrial, residential, and hospitality developments. His projects total more than 30 million square feet and over $3 billion, and over 200,000 homes on nearly 100,000 acres. Now join us as we welcome the Suburban Marketplace 2010 keynote speaker, Mr. Tom D'Alessandro.
It's good to be back. I've enjoyed living in Houston and working on two phenomenal projects that happen to be, I'll be featuring in my talk. The Woodlands, of course, and the Woodlands Town Center, and Bridgeland. So it's good to be back and see the teams. I'm happy to see that they are here today, so they hadn't had their fill of me yet. And it's good to see colleagues who we've worked with, the architects, attorneys, engineers, construction people, who worked with us on part of our teams in building those wonderful communities. Okay, I'm ready to go. Good. And also, it's great to be here at Midway, at Midway's City Center. I think this is a wonderful example of some of what we're going to talk about. I've been asked to talk about the future of suburbia and what are the transitions it's going through and what's it going to, where's it headed? And I don't really know, of course, but I have some ideas of the themes that are going to be important and gain in importance. I thought I would start by talking a little bit about where it's been. How did suburbia occur? And I would argue that we're now in our fourth generation. If you call a generation 20 years, we're in our fourth generation of suburban development. And the first wave, I would say, was that period between 1945, right after World War II, to 1965. Then I'd say there was a completely different set of things happening between 65 and 85 in the second generation, a completely new set of things happening in 85 to 2005, and now that we're in the fourth generation, I think even more is changing. But the first wave had much to do with the Highway Act. It had a lot to do with the creation of government-sponsored mortgages. It had to do with the adoption of automobiles, which were not really mass-produced or mass-purchased until the 1920s. And finally, it had a lot to do with the construction of airports, particularly if you take a place like Houston, where Houston is Bush Intercontinental is number 3 in the country in terms of hub airports. When the hub airport system developed in the 1980s, from that period on, the best way of correlating or predicting job growth was also to predict flight increases in passenger traffic at hub airports. They're very highly correlated, and most of those jobs went to the suburbs. The first phase was the residential phase, and this is an illustration of the American dream. We had 30,000 Americans move to the suburbs, really settle the suburbs, be the first wave in that 15-year period right after World War II. And the suburbs at that point in time were fairly monolithic. This was Levittown, this was some of the, they were really just bedroom communities. They were reliant entirely on the center city for employment, for shopping, for recreation, for entertainment. So they were one-dimensional places. But in that second generation that starts in 1965, the next slide, you begin to see retail moving out to the rooftops, and the suburban mall and the suburban strip center. Keep in mind, there are no suburban malls really that date prior to this period. It's an asset class that was invented to take advantage of the fact that people were moving to the suburbs, or had been moving to the suburbs, and it reached a critical mass. What that meant for many municipalities was the main department stores that had been downtown and only downtown for generations began to open up satellite locations in the suburbs. What it also meant is that some entrepreneurial merchants working with the mall companies became national merchants. And this was when you begin to see the chain merchants. Up until this point, very often people would be shopping downtown, and aside from Sears and Montgomery Ward's, the stores they shopped at were local. There really weren't many national merchants prior to the suburban mall. follow slide, is the next wave, also happening in that 1965 to 1985 period, is employment. And most employment at this point in time is still downtown. The CBDs, the central business districts of the major cities, was where people still went to work. Again, the suburbs were still predominantly bedroom communities. But in that period, starting in 65 to 85, you begin to see offices being built, usually in very natural settings, single-story, two-story, three-story office buildings, one or two tenants, and they were often research-oriented or back-office-oriented. You didn't see a lot of major companies moving their headquarters out to suburban locations. They were still locating themselves downtown. So this was really what was happening in that second generation. The suburbs are becoming more rich in terms of the assets the asset classes that are there, the activities that are occurring there. They're still predominantly bedroom communities, but more and more employment's moving out there, more and more of the shopping's moving out there. The third generation, which starts in 1985, next slide, is really the introduction of urban amenities. And the best, where we are right now, City Center is one example. The Woodlands Town Center is another. And now you've seen a shift from single-use land planning to mixed-use land planning. The uses are now woven together for an added level of convenience. But next slide. But you still have now an emerging hierarchy of place. So whereas the suburbs have been very flat with kind of one kind of place, the Rambler House, the subdivision, now you have employment, now you have retail, now you have mixed use, but you still also have the large natural open spaces. So you're beginning to see a hierarchy of place in the suburbs that's actually in some instances richer or more rewarding than would have been in the historic city centers. And in what the suburbs had offered, the better suburbs offer, the combination of the vitality of a downtown with the serenity of natural settings. And that is their competitive advantage. The next slide. I'm sorry for this. And when you do surveys of people, of all the adult population, and you ask preference, who wants to live in the country, who wants to live in the city, who wants to live in villages or suburbs, the largest percent prefer the small village. Rural, there's a group of people who like the rural, obviously there's a group of people who like city center and high-density cities, but most people prefer that middle ground of a village. And the master plan communities gave people an opportunity to have everything in one community, again, the vibrant downtown, the full range of activities, but also a very strong civic dimension, interaction with friends, relatives, with little leagues, school PTA, other things that wove together the community in a stronger sense. So you had that, and again, you had the natural setting. Next. So those are really where we are. And so as we look to what is the fourth set of transitions that are going to occur, and I think you have to, again, as with the first three, you have to step back and look at what's been happening at a national level and actually at an international level. What trends are going to have an impact? So the trend of, again, moving to the suburbs residentially triggered the trend of retail, triggered the trend of employment, triggered the trend of mixed use. We're at another inflection point, and what trends can we expect? So I'm going to talk a little bit about, and I won't really be making predictions as much as I'll just be saying, these are the things that I think are factors to consider, and I don't know exactly how they'll play out. I think there's a lot of debate over how these things will play out, but I think these are factors that are going to be pretty significant in the next generation. And first and foremost, I think everybody here would have to agree, or at least acknowledge, that the recession is one of the factors in this new generation. I think it's changing people's mindsets, it's changing certain business practices, and for I think everyone in the room, the recession, I would say of 2008, 2009, was the most severe they've seen, at least in terms of it being an international recession, bringing everybody down at the same time.